Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel Law Point. This is your host Mrs. Renu Thomas. Our previous sessions were all on the topic lease. In this episode, we are going to deal with some frequently asked questions on this topic. We have with us Mrs. Praseena Elizabeth Joseph, advocate on record from the Supreme Court of India, to answer our queries. So let's watch this episode. Here goes our first question. What can the landlord do if the tenant doesn't leave the leased premises even after the lease ends?
If the tenant, even after the lease period is over, is not vacating or leaving the leased premises, then the landlord can file eviction suit against the tenant before Rent Control Court. It is important to note herein that even before the lease period expires, the landlord can file eviction suit against the tenant on the ground that the tenant is not paying the rent properly or the leased premises is required by the landlord for his own personal use.
Question 2. What is the importance of giving notice of termination?
In a lease or rent agreement, giving notice of termination of the lease to either party is very important. Notice of termination is important for the landlord because if the tenant is intending to vacate the leased premises before the expiration of the lease period, then the landlord can look for other tenants for his premises. Notice of termination before the expiration of the lease period for a tenant is important because if the landlord requires the leased premises, the tenant can look for alternate accommodation elsewhere. Now, how many days of notice is required can be decided by the parties in their rent agreement. It can be either 15 days notice or 1 month notice that can be decided by the parties in their rent agreement. However, if the rent agreement does not specify any time period for the notice, then it will be normally 15 days notice.
Here goes to question 3. If the lease ends but the tenant keeps paying rent and the landlord accepts it, and can the tenant continue to stay in the leased premises?
If even after the lease period is over and the tenant is continuing in possession of the leased premises and the rent is accepted by the landlord or his agent, then legally speaking, the tenant can stay in the leased premises till the time the rent is accepted by the landlord or his agent. Here the tenancy is legally continued month-to-month basis till the time the rent is accepted by the landlord or his agent. This month-to-month tenancy after the lease period is over is provided under section 116 of the Transfer of Property Act.
Here goes our last question. Is registration of lease compulsory?
If the landlord and the tenant execute a lease deed wherein the leased premises are leased out for a period of 11 months, then the lease agreement need not be compulsorily registered. However, if the leased property is leased out for a period more than 12 months or over a year, then the lease deed need to be compulsorily registered.
Thank you for watching. See you next week with another legal topic. Till then, bye-bye.